Part 1. The Concrete Tomb. April 1945. Introduction. The Oath of Blood. I swear to thee, Adolf Hitler, loyalty and bravery. I vow to thee and to the superiors whom thou shalt appoint, obedience unto death. Every man in the SS swore this oath. But for the man of the Führerbunker, it was not just a formality. It was their entire existence. These were the elite of the elite. To join, you had to be over 6 feet tall, have perfect Aryan lineage, and be fanatically loyal. They were the men in the black uniforms standing like statues behind Hitler in every newsreel. For years, they lived a life of privilege. They traveled on the Führer's private train, America. They ate the best food, drank the best wine, and were feared by generals and ministers alike. But by April 1945, the glory was gone. The master race was hiding in a damp, sewage-smelling hole in the ground beneath the Reich chancellery, the Führerbunker. In these final days, the bodyguards, men like Rochus Misch, Otto Günsche, and Heinz Linge, faced a terrifying reality. The man they swore to protect was about to kill himself, and he was leaving them to face the wrath of the entire Red Army alone. Part title: The Praetorian Guard. Chapter 1. The Bunker Rats. April 27, 1945. Berlin is burning. Inside the bunker, time has lost its meaning. The air filtration system is whining constantly, struggling to keep out the dust of the shelling. The smell is a mix of concrete dust, diesel fumes, sweat, and cheap alcohol. The bodyguards are exhausted. They haven't slept in days. Rochus Misch, the telephonist and bodyguard, sits at the switchboard. He is the ears of the bunker. He listens as the lines go dead, one by one, as Soviet tanks overrun the telephone nodes. He knows the end is hours away. Otto Günsche, Hitler's personal SS adjutant, a giant of a man, stands guard at the heavy steel door of Hitler's private quarters. He sees the disintegration of the leader. Hitler is shaking, drooling, shuffling like an old man. The God they worshipped is broken, but the discipline holds. When Hitler walks past, they click their heels. They still say, "Heil Hitler." It is the theater of the absurd performed 10 meters underground. Upstairs, in the ruins of the chancellery, other SS guards are drinking themselves into a stupor. They are dancing with secretaries, having sex in the dentist's chair, trying to forget that the Russians are just 500 meters away at Potsdamer Platz. But downstairs, the mood is funeral. Chapter 2. The Final Order. April 30th, 1945. The day of the end. Hitler calls for Otto Günsche. He gives him the hardest order a bodyguard can receive. "I do not want to be a display in a Russian wax museum," Hitler says. "You must promise me that after I shoot myself, you must burn my body completely." Günsche, a man who has seen the horrors of the Eastern Front without blinking, turns pale. To fail to protect the Führer is one thing. To burn him like garbage is another. But an order is an order. Günsche calls Erich Kempka, the Führer's chauffeur. "We need petrol, all of it." In the middle of a Russian artillery barrage, the bodyguards are running out to the garage, siphoning gas from crippled limousines, carrying jerry cans through the fire. At 3:30 p.m., a gunshot rings out. The bodyguards wait. Then Linge and Günsche enter the room. They see the broken temple, the blood on the sofa, Eva Braun curled up dead from poison. There is no time for mourning. Chapter 4, The Final Order. May 1st, 1945. Hitler is dead. Goebbels has poisoned his 6 children and shot his wife, then himself. The bunker is now filled with dead bodies and terrified survivors. The bodyguards are leaderless. Johann Rutenhauer, the head of the security service, gathers the men. He says, "We have 2 choices. We stay here and wait for the Russians to shoot us, or we try to break out." They choose the breakout. They gather their weapons: STG-44 assault rifles, Lugers, grenades.
They raid the pantry for food. They change out of the dress uniforms into camouflage smocks or Wehrmacht tunics, ripping off their SS collar tabs to hide their identity. They're no longer bodyguards. They're just men trying to survive in a city that wants to kill them. The plan is madness. They have to move through the subway tunnels, U-Bahn, surface at the Friedrichstraße station, cross the River Spree under heavy fire, and try to reach the Allied forces. Rochus Misch decides to stay behind. He says, "I will disconnect the phones." The rest, led by Günsche and Brigade Führer Lubyanka, load their weapons. They open the heavy steel door and step out into the burning night of Berlin. Transition to Part 2. The protective bubble of the bunker is gone. The bodyguards are now in the kill zone. They will join a desperate column of tanks and soldiers trying to punch a hole through the Soviet ring of steel. In the next part, we will cover the breakout at the Wandemir Bridge, the chaotic battle where Martin Bormann vanished, the Tiger tank charge that went wrong, and the moment the Praetorian Guard realized there was no escape.
Part 2. The Breakout and the Cage. May 1st through May 3rd, 1945. Chapter 5. The Subway to Hell. May 1st, 1945. 11 p.m. The Führerbunker is now a tomb. The ventilation hums, but the air is stale, smelling of cyanide and fear. General Krebs and General Bergdorf, the last remaining military commanders, have sat down at a table, opened a bottle of cognac, and shot themselves. The survivors of the Führer Begleitkommando, Hitler's escort command, gather their gear. Led by SS Brigadier Führer Wilhelm Mohnke, the commander of the chancellery defense, they divide into 10 groups. This is not an army anymore. It is a desperate caravan. It includes hardened SS giants like Otto Günsche, Hitler's personal pilot Hans Bauer, the rat-faced party secretary Martin Bormann, but also Hitler's secretaries, Traut Junge, Gerda Christian, and the cook, Constanze Manziarli. They enter the U-Bahn tunnels beneath the Wilhelmplatz station. The scene inside the tunnels is something out of Dante's Inferno. There is no electricity. The only light comes from flickering flashlights and the occasional explosion from the surface that shakes dust from the ceiling. The tracks are crowded with thousands of Berlin civilians, women, children, wounded soldiers, hiding from the Russian artillery. The SS men, armed with MP-40s and STG-44s, push their way through the huddled masses. They step over sleeping bodies. They ignore the pleas for food. They are focused on one thing: survival. Otto Günsche, the man who just burned Hitler, towers over the crowd. He is carrying a heavy machine gun. He is still wearing his SS uniform, though he has ripped off the insignia. But you cannot hide a man like Günsche. He looks like what he is, the Praetorian Guard. They walk for hours in the dark, sloshing through ankle-deep water, breathing in the smell of sewage and death. Their goal is the Friedrichstraße station, a potential crossing point over the River Spree. Chapter 6. The Massacre at the Weidendammmer Bridge. Midnight, May 2nd, 1945. The groups emerge from the subway station into the apocalypse. The sky over Berlin is glowing red. The Soviet searchlights, Stalin's eyes, are sweeping the streets, blinding anyone who moves. They reach the Weidendammmer Bridge. This is the bottleneck, the only way north. But the bridge is blocked. A storm of Soviet fire is hammering the crossing. Heavy machine guns, mortars, anti-tank guns. The Red Army is waiting. The first group, led by Mohnke, hesitates. It is suicide to cross. Then a miracle happens, or so it seems. A handful of German tanks, King Tigers and self-propelled guns, appear from the smoke. They are the remnants of the Nordland Division. Martin Bormann, desperate to escape, suggests a plan. We will use the tanks as a shield. We walk behind them across the bridge. It is a desperate gamble. The Tiger tank revs its engine and rolls onto the bridge. A cluster of men, including Martin Bormann, SS Dr. Ludwig Stumpfegger, and youth leader Archer Oxman, crouch behind its steel hull. They make it halfway across. Then a Soviet anti-tank shell, or perhaps a Panzerfaust fired by mistake in the confusion, hits the Tiger. Boom! The explosion is massive. The tank is blown apart. The men walking behind it are thrown into the air like rag dolls. Oxman is wounded but survives. He crawls into a shell crater. Later, he would testify that he saw 2 bodies lying in the moonlight near the Lärcher station, Martin Bormann and Dr. Stumpfegger. They were not torn apart by the explosion. They were lying on their backs, foam at their mouths. They had bitten their cyanide capsules. The man who controlled the Nazi party was dead, not by a bullet, but by his own cowardice. But for the rest of the bodyguards, the explosion on the bridge signals chaos. The group splinters. Günsche, Linge, pilot Hans Bohr, and Monkey realize the bridge is a death trap. They retreat. They try to find another way. They are now running through burning courtyards, climbing over rubble, dodging Soviet patrols. The cohesion of the elite unit is broken. It is every man for himself. Chapter 7. The Last Stand at the Brewery. May 2nd, morning. A strange silence falls over Berlin. The shelling stops. SS Brigade Führer and Monkey, along with Günsche, Linge, and a few hundred other survivors find themselves trapped in the cellars of the Schottheiss Patzenhofer brewery in the north of the city. They are exhausted. They have no ammunition left. They are surrounded. News begins to filter in from the streets. General Weidling, the commander of Berlin's defense, has ordered a surrender. Loudspeaker vans are driving through the ruins announcing, "The Führer is dead. Fighting is senseless. Lay down your arms." Inside the brewery, the mood is grim. The women, the secretaries, are terrified of what the Russians will do to them. The SS men are terrified of what the Russians will do to them. Günsche and Linge look at each other. They made a pact to kill themselves. But in the cold light of day, the survival instinct is stronger. Also, they have a secret that is their only bargaining chip. They are the only ones who know for sure that Hitler is dead. They know where the body is. At 3 p.m., Soviet soldiers kick down the doors of the brewery. Handy Hock! The elite of the Third Reich, the men who stood guard at the Breakout, surrender. They are stripped of their watches, their rings, and their leather coats. They are marched out into the daylight. Otto Günsche, the giant, is immediately spotted by a Soviet intelligence officer. "You," the officer points. "You are SS. Who are you?" Günsche straightens up. "I was the personal adjutant to the Führer." The Russian officer's eyes go wide. He has caught a big fish. Günsche is separated from the group. He is not thrown in with the regular POWs. He is put in a special car. He is going to Moscow.
Chapter 8. The Man Who Stayed Behind, Rochus Misch. While his comrades were fighting and dying on the bridge, Rochus Misch was still in the bunker. He stayed at the switchboard until the very end. On the morning of May 2nd, the bunker is silent. The generators have stopped. It is pitch black. Misch unplugs the cables. He writes a final letter to his wife. He climbs the stairs, he pushes open the heavy steel door, and steps out into the chancellery garden. He sees the shell crater where he watched his boss burn 2 days ago. It is just a black smudge on the ground now. He tries to run. He makes it a few blocks to the Stettiner station, but he is tired. He is just a telephonist, not a combat soldier. He sees a group of Soviet soldiers. He doesn't shoot. He raises his hands. "I surrender," he says in German. The Russians search him. They find his paybook. It says, Begleitkommando. The soldiers cheer. They think they have captured a high-ranking general. Misch tries to explain, No, I just answered the phone. But it doesn't matter. He is thrown into a truck. His destination is the same, the Lubyanka. Chapter 9. The Train of Ghosts. May 1945. The Journey to Moscow. Linge, Günsche, Misch, Bauer, the pilot, and Rattenhuber, security chief, are not treated like ordinary prisoners of war. They are trophy prisoners. They are transported in a special train with barred windows. They arrive in Moscow, but they do not go to a camp. They go to the fearsome Lubyanka prison, the headquarters of the NKVD, later KGB. They are stripped naked, shaved, and deloused. They are given rough prison uniforms. They are put in solitary confinement. The lights are on 24 hours a day. The interrogation begins. Chapter 10. Where is Hitler? The Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin does not believe Hitler is dead. The body found in the garden was badly burnt. The dental records match, but Stalin is paranoid. He thinks it's a trick. He thinks Hitler escaped to Spain or Argentina. He needs living witnesses, and he has them. The interrogation of Günsche and Linge is brutal. It is not always physical torture, though beatings happen. It is psychological destruction. You are lying. The NKVD interrogator screams at Linge. We know he escaped. You flew him out. Where is he? Linge the valet repeats the same story for the 100th time. I carried him out. We burned him. I saw the fire. Lies! They are woken up every hour. They are forced to stand for days. They are put in the box, a cell so small you cannot sit or lie down. The Soviets want a specific narrative. They want to prove that Hitler died like a coward, biting poison, which was considered unmanly compared to a bullet. Günsche insists he shot himself. The NKVD beats him. Write it again. He took poison. This goes on for years, not weeks, years. The Bodyguards become the authors of the Hitler book, a massive dossier compiled for Stalin, detailing every single minute of Hitler's life from 1933 to 1945. They are forced to remember what he ate for breakfast in 1941, what tie he wore in 1943, who he screamed at in 1944. They become living encyclopedias of the Third Reich, kept alive only to feed Stalin's curiosity. Chapter 11. The Confrontation. In 1946, the NKVD tries a new tactic. They bring the prisoners together. In a brightly lit room, they place Otto Günsche and Hans Bauer, the pilot, face to face. Bauer is convinced Hitler is alive. He shouts, I had a plane ready. He must have made it. Günsche looks at the pilot with dead eyes. Hans, I burned him. I smelled his flesh. He's dead. Bauer breaks down weeping. The NKVD records every word. Meanwhile, Rochus Misch is suffering a different kind of hell. He is tortured to give up the codes to the secret communication systems. He doesn't know them. He was just the operator. He writes a letter to the head of the NKVD, Beria, begging for death. Shoot me, he writes. I know nothing. The letter is ignored. They're not allowed to die. They are the keepers of the secret. Transition to Part 3. For 10 years, the Bodyguards rot in Soviet prisons. The world forgets them. They are declared dead in Germany. Their wives remarry. But in 1955, Konrad Adenauer, the Chancellor of West Germany, travels to Moscow to negotiate. He strikes a deal to release the last German POWs. The ghost train prepares to leave Moscow. In the final part, we will cover the return of the ghosts, how Günsche and Linge adjusted to a world that hated them, their secret meetings, and the burden of being the last men to see the devil alive.
Chapter 12. The Chancellor's Deal. By 1955, the world had changed completely. The ruins of Berlin had been cleared. The Berlin Wall had not yet been built, but the Iron Curtain was firmly in place. West Germany was in the midst of the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. Volkswagen Beetles filled the autobahns. New skyscrapers rose in Frankfurt, and the horrors of the Third Reich were being buried under a layer of concrete and silence. Most Germans wanted to forget. They didn't talk about the war. They didn't talk about the SS. But in the frozen camps of Vorkuta, Siberia, and in the damp cells of the Lubyanka in Moscow, time stood still. There were still nearly 10,000 German prisoners of war held by the Soviet Union. Among them were the dregs of the Reich, the die-hard SS, the war criminals, and the personal staff of Adolf Hitler. Stalin was dead, 1953. The new Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, wanted to normalize relations with the West. In September 1955, West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer traveled to Moscow. It was a 10th summit. Adenauer had one demand: give me back my boys. Khrushchev agreed, but for a price: diplomatic recognition in exchange for the prisoners. The deal was struck. The gates of the Gulag creaked open. Chapter 13. The Train of the Undead. October 1955. The Friedland transit camp in West Germany. Thousands of women stood on the platform holding black and white photographs of husbands they hadn't seen in 10 years. Most of them were waiting for ghosts. When the train arrived, a hush fell over the crowd. The men who stepped off were not the arrogant Aryan warriors of 1940. They were broken skeletons. They wore padded Soviet jackets, fufikas. Their teeth were gone. Their skin was gray from years of malnutrition and lack of sunlight. Among this sea of misery stepped 3 men who carried a heavier secret than anyone else: Heinz Linge, Otto Günsche, and Rochus Misch. They were alive. Against all odds, they had survived the interrogation, the torture, and the Siberian cold. But their return was not a celebration. It was a shock. Rochus Misch's wife, Gerbe, had been told years ago that he was dead. She'd held a memorial service. Now she received a telegram: I am coming home. When they reunited, they were strangers. Misch had left as a young SS guard in a crisp uniform. He returned as a traumatized man with a 1,000-yard stare. Chapter 14. The Valet's Secret. Heinz Linge. Heinz Linge was Hitler's valet. For 10 years, he was the first person Hitler saw in the morning and the last he saw at night. He had poured the tea, brushed the coats, and eventually carried the corpse. Upon his return to Hamburg, Linge found himself in a bizarre position. He was a war criminal to the world, but a curiosity to the press. Reporters offered him fortunes for his story. Publishers wanted the gossip from the bunker. But Linge was cautious. The fear of the NKVD was still in his bones. He expected a Soviet assassin behind every corner. He tried to live a normal life. He got a job as a manager for the Delft's Nordmark construction company. But he couldn't escape his past. In 1980, just before his death, he finally published his memoirs, With Hitler to the End. The book was shocking not because of what it revealed, but because of its tone. There was no hatred, no condemnation. He talked about Hitler as a demanding but correct boss. He described the domestic banality of evil. He was a servant. I was a valet. A valet does not judge his master, he serves him, he maintained. Linge died in Bremen in 1980. He never expressed public remorse for the Holocaust. To him, his duty was separate from the genocide. He was a man who had compartmentalized his soul until there was nothing left. Chapter 15. The Giant's Silence. Otto Günsche. Otto Günsche was different. Standing 6'6", 2 meters tall, he was impossible to miss. He was the SS major who had stood guard at the door while Hitler shot himself. He was the man who lit the match. After his release, Günsche returned to North Rhine-Westphalia. He made a decision: absolute silence. He refused almost all interviews. He refused to write a book. He refused to go on TV. He knew too much. He knew that if he spoke, he would be hounded by neo-Nazis who wanted a new leader, and by prosecutors who wanted to hang him. Günsche became a successful businessman. He managed a sauna and swimming pool company. He lived a quiet, bourgeois life. He married, had children. But he was a haunted man. Every year, on April 30th, the phone would ring. Historians, journalists, crackpots. They all wanted to know, did he really die? Did you really burn him? Günsche would slam the phone down. Only once did he break his silence significantly, giving a secret testimony to archivists, confirming the details of the cremation to stop the conspiracy theories. But the weight of the past was a cancer eating him from the inside. He lived longer than almost all of them. He saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. He saw the new millennium. But he could not escape the bunker. On October 2, 2003, at the age of 86, Otto Günsche filled his bathtub with water. He stepped in, and he shot himself. The man who had given the order to burn Hitler, the man who had survived the inferno of Berlin and the hell of Soviet prisons, decided to leave the world on his own terms. It was a final, grim echo of the suicide that he had witnessed 58 years earlier.
Chapter 16. The Last Witness. Rochus Misch. And then there was one, Rochus Misch, the telephonist. Unlike Günsche, Misch did not hide. In fact, he became a tourist attraction. He bought a small house in Berlin-Rudolph, just a few miles from the site of the bunker. He opened a shop selling paints and wallpaper. For decades, if you bought paint in Rudolph, you were served by the man who saw Goebbels' children play with dolls hours before they were murdered. Misch was a simple man. He wasn't an officer like Günsche or a confidant like Linge. He was the little guy. And perhaps that is why he survived the longest. In his later years, as he reached his 90s, he became a celebrity. Journalists from New York, London, and Tokyo came to his living room. He would sit in his armchair, shuffling through old photos. He would show them letters from Eva Braun. She was a nice girl, he would say. The boss, chef, was a normal man. He wasn't the monster to us. He was a wonderful boss. This was the most chilling part of Rochus Misch. He possessed a bunker mentality until his dying breath. He refused to acknowledge the Holocaust as part of his reality. I was in the inner circle, he reasoned, and I never heard about death camps, so it wasn't my business. It was a terrifying display of willful blindness, a man who could sit next to the heart of darkness and see only a nice boss who liked apple cake. Misch became the guardian of the memory. When the movie Downfall, Der Untergang, was released in 2004, Misch was consulted. He critiqued the actor playing him. I didn't tremble like this, he complained. He lived to be 96 years old. On September 5th, 2013, Rochus Misch died in his bed in Berlin. With his death, the door to the Führerbunker finally closed forever. The last set of eyes that had seen Adolf Hitler alive were closed. Chapter 17. The Dossier. But the story had a postscript. In 2005, the Russian government finally declassified a secret document, the Hitler book, Das Buch Hitler. This was the 413-page dossier that Linge and Günsche had been forced to write for Stalin in the late 1940s.
For decades, it had gathered dust in a CBG safe. When it was published, historians were stunned by the level of detail. It described Hitler's uncontrollable flatulence, his drug addiction, his trembling hands, his paranoia. It was not a glorification. It was a clinical autopsy of a dictator, written by the men who knew him best, under the threat of a Soviet bullet. It confirmed once and for all that there was no escape to Argentina. There was no submarine. There was only a bullet and a fire.
Conclusion. The loyalty of the damned. The fate of Hitler's bodyguards is a study in the psychology of fanaticism. These men were the Praetorian Guard. They were sworn to obedience unto death. In a way, they kept their oath. They did not turn on him. They did not sell him out to the Allies to save their own skins. They burned him, they buried him, and they went to prison for him. Even after the war, when the full extent of the Nazi crimes was laid bare to the world, they refused to denounce him. Linge died a servant. Günsche died a suicide. Misch died in denial. They were the lost legions of a dead god. They serve as a dark reminder of the power of charisma and the danger of blind loyalty. They were men who stood so close to the fire that they burned their souls, and even 50 years of peace could not wash away the soot. The bunker is gone now. It is a parking lot in Berlin. But the ghosts of the men who stood guard there lingered long after the war was over, trapped in a prison of their own making, a prison of memory, silence, and blood.